What up guys, just want to go over the channel, the YouTube channel, the state. I want to say thanks for all the subscribers that I recently got. I believe we're at 823 right now, but I kind of want to revise what the channel will be. What I want to do is share you my experience, whether it's entertainment.
Oh, fuck.
Or bait reviews or how-tos, what works in certain scenarios of the season, and help you guys catch more fish.
Oh, yeah.
Or
yeah.
give you some sort of entertainment through my tournament fishing or my practice days. Let me actually just start it off with the video that I'm doing for next week. And I will be filming tomorrow, and I'll be doing some bait testing. I'm gonna include last week's video or last week's filming clips, and basically I was on the water. I hooked into a 5.5 pounder, 5.44 pounds at 20.5 inches. This is from day one, the prior day of testing all those baits out. And so, you know, the start of the day, I usually use my live scope from my Garmin UHD 93SV to scan out for fish that are positioned correctly, especially the big ones. The big ones like to suspend this time of year, and I could really just dial it in, locate where they are. And instead of guessing where they are, I know exactly where they are and where they're positioned, and I could fire my cast and take more accurate casts. So initially I thought this fish was pretty small based on the head shakes, but when it got closer to the boat, right underneath the boat, the drag started slipping, and not slipping, but the drag started functioning and the head shakes became bigger, and I instantly knew that the fish was a little bit bigger in size because the drag was on pretty tight and it was going to deep water right away. Usually those bigger fish, they know better. Once they get hooked, they go right to deep water usually.
This is giant, guys.
When I looked down, it was about 10 to 15 feet in water clarity, and the fish looked really small down there. But when I picked it up, I'm like, whoa.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Let's go.
This fish ain't small at all. It's
548. Yes.
But here it is. This little thing right there. I didn't have this plastic on here though. I had a 2.8 Kitech on there, and that's what I caught that 5.5 on the drop. And yeah, so I'll be doing some testing. I was not quite happy with this because it didn't get to the water column that I wanted to fast enough. So I'm gonna be trying out different jig heads, and I'll kind of let you guys know what works and what doesn't work. But if the bass are suspending, this is what I do recommend. Next setup will be, I believe this is the 1/8 ounce head made by Gamakatsu, and I want to test out this jig head with a 2.8 or 3.3 Kitech. It's a 2/0 hook, I believe. I have 6 or 8 pound head leader line from Sunline. sniper. But I want to test out this jig head, compare it to the Strike King jig head, and yeah, just do some comparisons, see if I get more bites using the plain jig head versus the yellow jig head made originally for crappie. These are just a little bit of extras that I know that can catch fish, but this time of the year we'll see if they actually trigger the fish to bite. This is a Flash Mob Junior A-rig, and what I did, I wanted to experiment. I cut off all the blades on this A-rig. Right now my girlfriend's sleeping, so I have to keep it down. But what I did is I took off all the willow blades on this Yum rig to keep it more natural, because the lake right now is about 15 feet visibility, 10 to 20 feet visibility. Wanted to go a little bit more natural, see how that turns out. I'll let you guys know. Here's that other bait, additional bait that might possibly work tomorrow. This is a 3/8 ounce jackhammer in shad pattern made by Z-Man and Zako trailer in like a shad and green pumpkin color. And I'll be throwing this on 12-pound test. Anyways, let's get on the water and see how I do. Peace.
Alright guys, so I'm in the car because the audio is gonna be lousy with all this wind going on. So yeah, we're at my favorite pond. You saw the lures that I tied on. We're about to get out there and see what we could do. It is blowing, so we're gonna stay safe. We have auto PFD on, and we're not gonna spot lock that often unless we're facing the wind. Anyways, I'll see you guys out there. I found fish on day one in this little small cove, so I got that 1/8 ounce jig head by Kamikaze tied on, and I put on a Kitech 2.8 on there. I see fish suspending all around, so the first thing I do, I turn on my live sonar, which is live scope, and I mark tons of fish suspending. So toss it out there and twitching it a little bit and reeling at the same time, and this is what happened. There we go. Right at the boat, guys. Gee whiz, what fish is this? Holy cow. That one struck it right at the boat. Some nice bass. Alright guys, 1/8 ounce. Schoolies. 1/8 ounce weight, 2.8 Kitech. It works, guys. Stole my Kitech. Alright guys, 16 1/4. Nice thick bass on the Kitech. Let's try to keep on going with this 1/8 ounce Kitech. I knew there's fish here. Wasn't sure if they were crappie or if they were bass, but now we got a good idea that they are bass. And I'm not fishing on the bottom, guys. I'm working this thing on the top. This bait's suspending, and what you got going on here is on the live scope, if you could see it clearly, there's fish on the bottom and there's fish suspending, anywhere from 3 to 6 feet suspending, and 13. So we're gonna keep at it. We're gonna keep on tossing this little tiny swim bait, see if we can get a big one to commit. But that was pretty fast on the Kitech. I decided to take off from that cove to a new section of the lake. I heard reports of fish moving up shallow, so I decided to fish these little tule berms, like a little secondary spot before it really gets super shallow in the back end for fish to spawn. But it's not quite there. I believe it was 53 to 54 degrees, and so I think it's probably gonna take another week, 2 weeks for the water to warm up maybe a degree or so that way they could like really push up to the bank, find their spots, and etc. But yeah, I'm just fishing that additional bait that I decided to throw, the chatterbait that has like a shad color pattern on there. And I'm just working it on the edges of those tule berms and working it on the edges of all that brush that's submerged in the water. Didn't get any bites, so I move on. So the previous night I had tied on some baits that I was determined to test the next day. But I definitely don't want to restrict myself. I want to fish the conditions. So I decided to pick up a 110 jerkbait. This is the +1. It's not like a translucent model or transparent model. So I'm taking a few casts. This is a secondary point with some brush on it. This is where the biggins would pull up right before the spawn. And I really wanted to see like how shallow are these fish and how active are they in the pre-spawn right now. Gotten bit really shallow yet. Other than that other fish in 13 feet of water, I just don't think the big ones are pulling up shallow just yet. So I quickly move on after this. Actually, I gave it a couple hours shallow, at least an hour shallow, and didn't get bit all day. It's pretty tough conditions. Bluebird skies, lots of winds, and the water temp was anywhere from 52 to 53.5. Moving to another spot where I know they're loaded. On day one, I found schools of 20 and 30 fish just hanging out next to rock. So I'm fishing this offshore area in 24 feet of water, and these fish are stacked. They're stacked on rock and hard bottom, and every day has been a battle of figuring out like what's gonna trigger them, because the 2.8 Kitech slow rolling it doesn't have any really action that will trigger these fish. It's more of a very natural bait that, you know, you could just slow roll it in front of their face, and if they're active enough, they'll bite it. But these fish are not wanting to eat right now. So I really gotta force them or trigger them to really bite. So right here, you see me throwing this A-rig, and I'm getting a lot of short strikes. And again, this bait, it does have like this action where the light wires will pulsate, and that could trigger them. But that wasn't the deal. So in a couple of minutes here, you'll see me pick up the jerkbait rod, and this is what happened. So what I usually do is I take a long cast past the area that I want to fish, and I reel down quickly, probably like 3 or 4 cranks, and then I start either ripping it or I let it sink depending where the fish are in the water column. If you guys have live scope, then you'll figure out where they are, if they're spinning off the bottom or not. And if they're on the bottom, I recommend letting that bait sink and just modifying it where the bait is sinking to the bottom at a slow rate. And you can do that with either hook upgrades that are a little bit heavier than the stock hooks, and I recommend doing this at home. Just fill up a deep bowl of water and put it at like 52, 53 degrees with a thermometer, and figure out if your bait is suspending or if your bait is sinking. And so, or if your bait is slowly sinking. So I did this test. I tuned up all my jerk baits before hitting the water, and this one is like a rate of fall 2, rate of fall 5. Oh yeah, baby. Oh, he came off. Oh my gosh, that was so fun. Just missed a fish. What happened is that I let it sink all the way to the bottom and did a few twitches, and one of the fish just actually committed to it or got triggered by it, but never really fully committed to it. These fish are so lethargic and they're not in the mood to eat. But this tactic is the only tactic would probably work on the lake because they're lockjaw, so I gotta get them. I gotta trigger them. At this point, I'm pretty frustrated. Still at the same spot where all the rock is and the hard bottom. There's tons of fish here, so I don't want to leave. And I got bit earlier, so you know, number one rule is if you get bit, stay in that spot, don't look for other fish, and try to figure out what will trigger them. Slow down if you have to. So I toss out my jerkbait. I don't know if you notice on the fishing graph, there's 3-4 big fish down there that are suspending. And so I took another cast. It's getting a little choppy, it's getting wind. I think that really helped trigger the bite more because you got probably a whole bunch of bait just coming through, right through those rocks where the bass could really ambush them. So I'm really like working my bait slowly. I'm letting that sink. I'm watching it on the graph. I'm letting it sink. So I'm being patient, letting it sink, sink, and sink. And I believe I'm throwing this on 10 or 12 pound test. I might even go down to 8 next time so that my bait could sink faster. There we go. Finally. Jeez, took a while. Small guy. Hooked good, fatty. McFat. McFat. Gosh dang. In the mouth and the gill plate. Fatty, guys, fatty. McFat. McFatty. Look at all those marks, guys. That's what I've been targeting right there. But this guy is a McFatty. He'll probably only go 12.5 inches. Oh, maybe not. Man, these 14 inches look smaller and smaller. They're so lethargic. All right, let's do this, guys. Second fish of the day. 14.25, guys. Finally hit the jerkbait. Golly, that was brutal. I decided to call it a wrap and head home. There's a couple things that I've learned on the water that I want to share with you guys. The 1/8 ounce Gamakatsu jig head did work. It's a great bait. I recommend the 1/8 ounce if you're targeting suspended bass in shallow water. If you are targeting bottom bass or fish deeper, I'd probably go 3/16 of an ounce to 1/4 ounce jig head. But don't get me wrong, the 1/8 ounce Gamakatsu jig head, I will be adding that in my arsenal, especially if I know that fish are suspending and it's a tough bite. that bait will get you, you know, those bites that you need in order to fill in your limit for sure. And they could be big. I mean, you saw me catch that 5.5 earlier, and then also that 16.25. Those aren't small fish. Those are pretty decent fish in a kayak tournament. Second thing that I learned is fish the conditions. If you're dealing with stubborn bass, you really want to trigger them. You don't want to just keep on throwing the same exact things over and over again. A good angler will always adjust to the conditions, adjust to the variables that they're dealing with. So if the fish are lockjaw, the moon is completely out, it doesn't set until the midnight. You know, you got to trigger these fish. You can't just continue to slow roll, let's say a HUD or a 2.8 Kitech or underspin. You have to go with a bait that will get them to fire up, hit the gas, and bite your bait. So I picked up that Megabass 110 plus 1 that I modified with some lead wire to get it down to 20 feet, 23 feet. At first I thought I paused 5-10 seconds, but looking at this video, I didn't pause that much. Actually, the most time-consuming factor in this was letting that bait sink down, because it is a ROF 2 or ROF 3. So it took, probably not a ROF 3, so it probably took 20 seconds to get down to 20 feet. So I'm thinking that's a ROF 10. I'd say anywhere from ROF 5 to ROF 10. So I'll, you know, sip on my energy drink or just relax every single cast. So I'll cast it, crank, 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 and then I'll let that bait fall until it's down maybe mid-water column or a little bit lower. And then I'll twitch, and then you'll start to see fish come up from the bottom to see what really is going on up there with that jerkbait. And then I just let it fall even more. I allow that bait to get all the way to the bottom at some point, and I would just jerk, pause, maybe 2 seconds, jerk, jerk, pause again, maybe a second or 2 seconds, and then jerk. For me, what worked is like those single jerks, but they could act different the next day or a week from now. I feel like the jerkbait bite is only going to get better. So when that bite gets better, those bass will be a little bit easier to trigger. But overall, learned quite a bit. Have more confidence in the jerkbait. Have more confidence in the Gamakatsu jig heads that I ordered. All the baits are linked down in the description. So if you are looking forward to support the channel and watch more of these experiences and bait comparisons, feel free to subscribe and like the video. Anyways, check it out. Peace.